It's 2002. A Silverado rolls into a dealership service bay just outside Dallas. The engine is ticking, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make a seasoned mechanic pause. He lifts the hood, listens, then shakes his head. Another one, he mutters. Most people at the time thought the Chevrolet Silverado was unstoppable, reliable, bulletproof. And at the heart of it sat one of the most trusted engines GM had ever built, the 5.7-liter Vortec. But what almost nobody knew was that this engine, this legend, was already living on borrowed time, because behind the scenes, General Motors had already made a decision. It had to go. And the real reason why is a lot more complicated than you think. To understand what happened, you have to go back before the Vortec name even existed. Back to the small block Chevy, the architecture that powered America for decades. We're talking about the classic 350 cubic inch V8, a simple pushrod design, cast iron block, overhead valves. Nothing fancy, but brutally effective. This wasn't just any engine design. This was the foundation that changed everything when it first appeared in 1955. Ed Cole and his team at Chevrolet created something special, lightweight for its time, compact, powerful enough to matter, but simple enough to build by the millions. And they did exactly that. For over 4 decades, the small block Chevy evolved. Different displacements, different applications, but always the same basic blueprint. By the 1980s, that engine had powered everything from Camaros to Corvettes to cargo vans. It was in police cruisers and pace cars. It won races and towed trailers. It was the heartbeat of American automotive culture. But by the early 1990s, something had to change. Emission standards were creeping up. Fuel injection was becoming mandatory. Carburetors were on their way out. And the old small block, as legendary as it was, needed updating. Not a complete redesign, just refinement. That's where the Vortec 5700 came in. By the mid-1990s, GM took that proven platform and evolved it into something new, something cleaner, more efficient, more modern, at least on paper. With a 4.0-inch bore and a 3.48-inch stroke, it kept the classic 350 dimensions. Total displacement, 5.7 liters, 350 cubic inches of American iron. But the real upgrade was in the heads. GM introduced high-swirl combustion chambers, better airflow, more efficient fuel burn. The ports were redesigned for better velocity, smaller runners than before, but shaped to tumble the air and fuel mixture more effectively. Compression ratio climbed to around 9.41. Nothing extreme, but optimized for real-world torque. And torque is exactly what it delivered, around 255 horsepower in truck form. But more importantly, about 330 lb-ft of torque, right where truck owners needed it. Low in the RPM range. Peak torque came in at just 2,400 RPM in some applications. Think about that. You didn't have to wind it out. You didn't have to downshift on every hill. You didn't have to rev it. You just pressed the pedal, and it pulled hard. The throttle response felt immediate. The power delivery was linear, predictable. You always knew exactly what you were getting. For daily driving, for towing, for hauling supplies to a job site, it was perfect. At the time, it felt perfect, durable, familiar, cheap to produce. GM could build these engines quickly. The tooling was already there. The supply chains were established. Parts were interchangeable with older engines in many cases. Mechanics didn't need special training. They already understood how it worked. And customers loved the way it felt. So what was the problem? At first, there wasn't one. In fact, early Vortec engines performed incredibly well. They powered millions of trucks and SUVs, including the Chevrolet Tahoe, the GMC Sierra, the Suburban, even some commercial van applications. Contractors loved them. Fleet buyers trusted them. Mechanics understood them. And on paper, they were everything GM needed. Sales were strong. Customer satisfaction was high. The engine had that intangible quality that matters more than specs ever could. It felt right. But underneath that success, cracks were forming, and they weren't obvious at first. The first issue was something most drivers would never think about: airflow. See, while the Vortec heads were a big improvement over older designs, the rest of the engine was still rooted in decades-old architecture. 2 valves per cylinder, pushrod valve train, limited breathing at higher RPM. The intake ports could only flow so much. The exhaust side was even more restricted, and when you tried to push the engine beyond its comfort zone, it just stopped making more power. That meant one thing: it couldn't scale. You could squeeze out a bit more power, maybe push it to 270 horsepower with aggressive tuning. But beyond that, you were hitting a wall, a hard wall. Meanwhile, competitors were moving fast. Ford was investing heavily in modular engines, overhead cam designs, better airflow, higher revving capability. The Triton V8s were showing up everywhere, and while they had their own issues, spark plug problems, cam phaser failures, they looked modern. They sounded modern. Dodge was bringing out the new Hemi. Chrysler was making noise about performance and heritage. Even if they weren't always more reliable, they were more modern. And perception matters. When a customer walks into a showroom, they're not just buying an engine. They're buying a feeling, a belief that they're getting the latest and greatest. And an engine architecture from 1955, no matter how refined, was getting harder to sell. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was emissions. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, emissions regulations were tightening fast. We're talking about stricter EPA standards, lower NOx limits, better fuel efficiency requirements. California had its own rules. Federal standards were changing every few years. And suddenly, that old small block architecture started to look outdated. The Vortec 5.7 used a central sequential fuel injection system in many applications. Better than carburetors, sure, but not as precise as newer multi-port or direct injection systems. Fuel atomization wasn't perfect. The spray pattern was decent, but not optimized for every cylinder individually. There was variation, inconsistency. Combustion wasn't as clean as it needed to be, and when you're trying to meet stricter emissions standards, good enough doesn't cut it. So GM engineers tried to adapt. They tweaked tuning, adjusted timing maps, improved sensors, added better oxygen sensors, refined the fuel delivery algorithms. They threw engineering hours at the problem, but there was only so much they could do, because the core design was the limitation. You can't fix a fundamental architecture problem with software alone. And then came the failures, not catastrophic ones, not engine-destroying explosions, but small, persistent issues that started adding up. The intake manifold gasket became notorious. Coolant leaks, internal seepage, oil contamination. Mechanics across North America saw it over and over again. The gasket material would degrade. Coolant would seep into the valley. Sometimes it mixed with oil. Sometimes it just leaked externally. Either way, it was a problem. And it wasn't a cheap fix. You had to pull the intake manifold, replace the gasket, hope nothing else was damaged. One tech reportedly said, "You didn't ask if a Vortec leaked, you asked when." That kind of reputation, it spreads. And then there was the infamous spider injection system, a central injector feeding multiple poppet valves. Each valve controlled fuel to individual cylinders. In theory, it was efficient, centralized, easy to package. In reality, it clogged. Deposits built up on the poppet valves. Fuel delivery became inconsistent. Misfires started creeping in. Cold starts got rough. The engine would stumble, hesitate. Idle quality dropped. Sometimes it ran rich, sometimes lean. Diagnostic codes would pop up. Customers would complain about performance. And suddenly, that bulletproof engine didn't feel so bulletproof anymore. Dealerships were seeing the same trucks coming back, the same complaints, the same fixes. Word got around. Forums started filling up with discussions. Mechanics shared stories. Owners compared notes. The shine was wearing off. But here's the thing. Even with all those issues, GM could have kept the 5.7 alive. They had the resources, they had the market, they had brand loyalty, they could have redesigned the intake gasket, Switch to better fuel injection? Fix the weak points? So why didn't they? Because something new was already waiting in the shadows. Something that would change everything. The LS engine. In 1997, GM quietly introduced a completely new V8 architecture, not an evolution, a revolution. The LS1. At first, it showed up in performance cars. The Corvette, the Camaro. Enthusiasts noticed immediately. This wasn't just a refresh, this was different. But engineers already knew where this was going. This wasn't just a sports car engine. This was the future of GM's entire V8 lineup. And compared to the Vortec 5.7, it was on another level. The LS design kept the pushrod layout. That part stayed. GM wasn't abandoning what worked. Pushrods were compact, simple, low cost, but everything else was new. Deep skirt aluminum block, cross-bolted main caps, stronger bottom end. The block itself was stiffer, more rigid, better able to handle higher cylinder pressures, improved oiling system that fed the crank more efficiently, better cooling passages that reduced hot spots and improved thermal management, and most importantly, airflow. The LS heads flowed significantly better, even in stock form. The ports were bigger, the valve angles were optimized, the combustion chambers were designed with modern CFD analysis. With a similar displacement, around 5.7 liters, the LS1 was already making about 345 horsepower in early applications. That's nearly 100 horsepower more than the Vortec, and it did it while being more efficient. Cleaner emissions, better fuel economy, more power per drop of fuel, higher rev capability. The LS1 could safely spin to 6,500 RPM or more. It wasn't just better, it made the Vortec look old overnight. Suddenly, everything that seemed fine about the 5.7 wasn't. So now GM had a choice. Keep investing in a platform that was already hitting its limits, or fully commit to something new. And here's where the real reason becomes clear. It wasn't just about power. It wasn't just about reliability. It was about scalability. The LS platform could evolve. Bigger bores, longer strokes, higher compression ratios. You could build a 4.8 liter, a 5.3 liter, a 6.0 liter, a 6.2 liter, all from the same basic architecture. You could use the same tooling, the same assembly lines, the same supplier network, but get completely different performance characteristics. And that's exactly what GM did. The 5.3-liter Vortec that replaced the 5.7 wasn't just a downgrade in size, it was an upgrade in every other way. Aluminum heads, coil near plug ignition, better fuel control, sequential multi-port fuel injection, around 285 horsepower right out of the gate, and room to grow, a lot of room. You could add variable valve timing later, direct injection, cylinder deactivation for fuel economy, all while keeping the same basic platform. That's what scalability means. Meanwhile, the old 5.7 had nowhere left to go. You could tweak it, refine it, patch its weaknesses, but you couldn't reinvent it, not without starting from scratch. And that's exactly what the LS already was. By 2002, the decision was final. GM phased out the 5.7 Vortec in trucks, replaced it with the new generation of LS-based engines. And just like that, one of the most iconic engines in American history was gone. Not with a bang, not with a recall or a scandal, just quietly retired. Production stopped, inventory sold through, and the next model year brought something different. But here's what makes this story so interesting. It didn't die because it failed. It died because it couldn't keep up. There's a difference. Failure means something broke. Something didn't work. But the 5.7 worked. It did exactly what it was designed to do. The problem was that the world changed around it. Regulations got stricter. Technology advanced. Competitors pushed harder. And GM realized they needed a platform that could adapt to whatever came next. Even today, the 5.7 Vortec is still respected. It's simple, easy to work on, cheap to maintain. Parts are everywhere. You can walk into any auto parts store in America and find what you need. Mechanics still trust it. They know its quirks. They know how to fix it. In fact, many would argue it's more real than modern engines. No complicated electronics, no direct injection carbon buildup, no turbochargers to fail, just fuel, air, spark, and torque. But the world moved on. Regulations got stricter. Customers demanded more power and better fuel economy. At the same time, every year, technology kept advancing, computer controls got better, materials, science improved, and corporate accountants demanded efficiency, flexibility, lower warranty costs. The LS platform went on to dominate, from trucks to sports cars to racing applications. 6.0 liters in heavy-duty trucks, 6.2 liters in performance models, supercharged variants pushing over 600 horsepower, all built on the foundation that replaced the 5.7, the same basic architecture, the same pushrod simplicity, but executed with modern technology. And that's the part most people don't realize. The Vortec didn't lose a battle. It was replaced by something that redefined the entire war. The LS platform didn't just compete with the old small block, it made the old small block irrelevant. So when you hear someone say the 5.7 Vortec was phased out because of reliability issues, or emissions, or competition, they're not wrong, but they're not telling the whole story, because the real reason is simpler and more brutal. It reached its limit. Every design has one. A point where you can't extract any more performance, any more efficiency, any more improvement. The 5.7 Vortec found that point, and GM decided to move forward instead of fighting it. In the end, the 5.7 Vortec wasn't a failure. It was the final evolution of a design that had already dominated for decades, a design that powered millions of vehicles, that built brands, that won customer loyalty, a design that defined an era. From 1955 to 2002, the small block Chevy was everywhere. It was the sound of American performance, the backbone of American trucks. But when the next generation arrived, there was no going back. And that's what makes this story so powerful. Not because the engine failed, but because it was finally replaced by something better. Something that took everything good about the original idea and pushed it further. That's not a tragedy. That's progress. If you enjoyed this deep dive, let me know what engine story you want next. Another legend, another rivalry, or another hidden truth from automotive history. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might change the way you see cars forever.